So, for many years, I studied and also received, like many of you, so much healing work, it's almost, leaves you speechless. And many of those modalities were very helpful, actually. I mean, there's a lot of powerful stuff out there. But I was unable, through all of these different modalities, to heal a very severe and kind of enigmatic depression, that I just absolutely could not get to the core of where this was coming from in my life. And it was a pretty big problem. And then at some point I also got a mysterious illness, which I dealt with for about 15 years. And again, regardless of what therapies, healing, I traveled around the world. I mean, I went to some of the most powerful people that are out there. And what I quickly saw was that most modalities are working with what can be known to some degree. We go as clients and we present the symptoms, or we present our memory or our story or our content about what went on. And when I discovered the work of Hellinger, what's also called family constellation therapy, what's also called movements of the soul, which is how I mainly refer to it, what I quickly realized is that this work, as you'll see, is actually working at a non-psychological level with the hidden dynamics that we're not able to find or uncover in any of these other modalities. And the work is used for everything, from more minor issues to severe illness to psychotic behaviors, on and on. But what people mainly turn to this work, I've seen again, similar to what happened with me. They've tried everything else, and it's like, what's happening here? Why is this pattern or this behavior or why am I still attracting this kind of mate? Why do I still act this way? Why can I still not get my career together? These uncanny things that we just can't shift. Often, it's because those particular things are not held in our energy field or in our mental, emotional, psychological body, but are actually held in the blueprint or the template of the family soul. And this is something that in this country we actually know very, very little about. And I'm happy to say that in Europe, it's now being done in over 30 countries around the world. And in Europe, it's absolutely mainstream. It's being done by doctors, homeopath therapists. It's being done with corporations, in prisons, schools, hospitals. And it's been found to be, such an impactful therapy for being able to get at what is the root cause of what's causing some of these disturbances that other therapies simply can't touch. So this work, really at its foundation, is about how can we free ourselves from the limits of our family, our cultural dictates, religious dictates, whatever groups that we've basically grown up with. Or even as adults, a lot of us have chosen to actually move in, especially in spiritual circles. We've actually moved into certain groups. And one of the most important things to understand about this work is that deep, deep in our core, we are being run by the play inside of ourselves, in our nervous system, between guilt and innocence. And I'm going to explain what that means. In any group that we belong to, of course, especially the family that we've been born into, our deepest need, a child's deepest love and deepest need is to belong to his or her parents, to really feel that they belong to their parents. And therefore, a child will do whatever's needed for that belonging to occur. And so we've all seen where people can do something feeling that they have an absolutely clear conscience, and actually they're doing great atrocities. So the man who created this work, Hellinger, grew up in pre-war Germany and then was alive during the war, was in and out of different prison camps, things like that. And he noted something quite obvious, which was that how is it that large groups of people can, create such an atrocity and actually have a clear conscience while they're doing it? And on the other hand, why is it that so many of us can do something that is obviously of benefit to mankind, and yet we feel kind of guilty about it? And so he really held that question deeply inside. What really is conscience? And what is really driving us? And so holding that question, he saw very deeply about what happens in a family. And this expands to any group at all that we're in, but I'm going to use family as the main example. And what occurs in these family systems is that I want to talk a little bit about the morphogenetic field, because I think that will help, to explain this in a larger sense. What Bert Hellinger found from a completely non-scientific standpoint, and what physicists and biologists have been studying and proving from a scientific viewpoint, is that there's something called morphogenetic fields. And it's that same energetic field or force field that governs, for example, a flock of birds when they all take off at once and they don't run into each other, or a school of fish. Well, humans and human groups, social groups, are also governed by this exact same field of energy. And some of the things that they've found about the morphogenetic field is that it contains memory, and that memory, it's great, they've actually proven this now, that memory is actually passed down generation from generation. And almost more importantly, when it comes to human relationships, is that this field, what we call in this work the family soul, has no greater urge or desire than to remain whole. Therefore, if one person in the family is excluded, or there's an injustice that goes on, or someone's hurt in some way, the family soul, or the morphogenetic field, is going to do whatever it needs to do to remain whole. And this gets passed down generation after generation after generation. So I'm going to give you some really simple examples that we see of how this happens. Like I said, a child has no greater need than to feel that it belongs to its parents. And of course, this is a survival for strategy that we all have. A strategy for survival. And if this child senses, for example, that the parent wants to leave the system to be with another person, or perhaps they have an illness, the child unconsciously, in the silent language of the soul, is saying inside of themselves, I'll do anything to be with you. I'll even die to be with you. And we often see in cases like this that later on the child gets ill, or that a disease is created, or there's an uncanny accident and the child dies. And it can happen when the child is still a child, or it can happen much later when this child has grown. It's the same pattern is actually still taking place. Now, one of the things that Hellinger discovered doing thousands of family constellations is that there's certain, what he calls orders of love. And these are universal laws of relating, if you want to call them that. And he's traveled around the world. He actually originally discovered these for 20 years working with the Zulu in South Africa. This work has a distinctly shamanistic base to it, actually. And what he found were these orders of love that operate in every social group. It doesn't matter where you go. And so I'm going to give you an example of some of these orders. The first and most important order of love is that every member of the family system has an equal right to belong and be honored. And we can see that this is often not followed. So belonging is the most important order of love. And when someone from the system is excluded, thanks. For example, say parents might have a child, and if this child were to die, and it were not, that's a huge grief, burden of grief. And let's say the child were not, grieved and given a name and really given a place in the family system, recognized as a person in this family system. And then let's say that the parents go on and they have another child, in a way almost as a substitute, because they really want a child. And so after some time they forget about the first child. That would be considered an exclusion. And again, in the family soul, that is a big distortion in the energy field of the family. And lo and behold, in an almost uncanny way, someone later on, a person from a later generation, will take up the fate of that excluded person. So another example might be if there's someone in the family who's not, they're not living up to the family rules or the family belief systems, or the family's involved in abuses that this person doesn't want to be a part of. And so they're excluded from the family. Again, homosexuality is a great example of this. If that's something that's not okay in the family, and so there's even maybe subtle exclusions, that's felt very deeply in the soul, in the family soul. And again, someone from a later generation in some way will be kind of chosen by the family soul to take up the role of that earlier person. So, whenever I talk about that part, I realize what a truly profound thing that is. I mean, what I'm actually saying is that many of us, at least in some aspect of our life, we're not even living our own fate. We literally are living the fate of someone we may not even know from our ancestry. And so this work is about uncovering is there a hidden dynamic or a hidden, I don't want to use the word agreement because it's not about there being an agreement, but is there a hidden generational thing that's being passed down that once discovered and seen and acknowledged for what it is can then be resolved. And actually, one of Hellinger's well-known books is called Acknowledging What Is. And so the first part of any family constellation is first, and you'll know what I'm talking about once you see this, but is first we set up the dynamic and we actually see what the hidden dynamic is. And then the second part is we bring in the resolutions. Just checking. So I just want to say a little bit more about the orders of love, then I'm going to go right into the video so we have enough time for questions. I mentioned about the first order of love, about the need to belong. And I want to say something about, when I keep talking about this family soul, well, who am I actually talking about? Because that's pretty important actually to understand who is it that actually belongs in the family soul. Because it's a lot more complex than we think. So, of course, the parents and any children, including any stillborn or aborted or miscarried children, belong in the family soul. Grandparents are part of the family soul, and often, aunts and uncles, so they're siblings. Sometimes great-grandparents. Anybody who's been excluded in the family still has an impact on the family soul. So that may be many generations back, and they need to be part of the family soul. Anyone who's had a particularly difficult fate, or was pushed away so that someone else could be made room for. Okay, so an example of that, I'm going to use again an example from Germany, was when many of the Jewish people were pushed out of their houses to make room for some of the Germans who moved in. Interestingly enough, in this work, it's been found that those families are now part of the same family soul. Another more common example is ex-spouses who have left to make room for, say, a new wife or a new husband. They're still part of the family soul. And the way that you can actually know, because it's not about, well, God, I got to get it straight, who's part of my family soul. It's not about that. The way you can actually tell who's part of this energy field is by who has an effect on it. So when I set up a constellation, I don't necessarily have it in mind who's part of it and who isn't. I actually test it out. And so there's a lot of kind of testing that can go on. If I have a sense, oh, there's an ex-spouse who's having an effect, on the children from a new marriage, I'll bring someone in as a representative and check out to see if that person's actually having an effect. And they may or they may not be. So that's some of the people that are included in this family soul. And it's particularly important, and Bert Hellinger has spent a lot of his focus on looking at perpetrators and victims. Because perpetrators and victims, of course, have a very strong bond, as you'll see very clearly in this first piece. And they often end up belonging in the same family soul, even if they're from different families. Just to give you an idea of the orders of love, I'll just tell you the second one. The second order of love is hierarchy according to time. And what that means is that whoever has come into the system first has priority. So a really obvious example of this is that parents and their relationship have a priority over the children. Now, what does that translate as? It translates as parents give and children take. And probably everyone in this room has experienced the opposite to some degree. If you in any way were part of the typical dysfunctional family where children gave and parents took. Now that seems like a very obvious order of love, that parents give and children take. And actually the firstborn, receives from the parents and gives to the secondborn, and on down, like that. But incest is actually an example of the reversal of this order of love. It's a very obvious example of where the children are giving and the parents are taking. And so you can see that not being disconnected from these fundamental orders that we used to know when we lived in groups of people about 20 to 30, these were obvious things that we followed because we had to for our survival. But as we as a culture put more and more and more fixation on our own personal development, we've forgotten about that there's this larger morphogenetic field that governs the good of everyone, and that we're not just living, for our own good. So just before I put the video on, any questions just about that right now?
Well, you began by saying something about people's feelings of guilt and where do they come from?
Yes, thank you for bringing that back around. Yeah. Oh, right, I'm being trained. So there was a question about guilt and innocence, and thanks for bringing that back. In its service to this need to belong in the family for survival, we have a very instinctual urge, and it's felt as feeling good or bad, or innocent and guilty. And what goes on is that when we give to someone, we feel good. And we feel a little bit entitled to receive back. And this is it can be very subtle or it can be very obvious depending on the relationship. And when somebody gives to us, we feel just a little bit guilty, a little bit like, oh, I've got to give back now. And so this play between guilt and innocence, which is so subtle and is that constant play in the energy field, in our nervous system, is actually what guides a balance of giving and taking in the family soul and in any relationship that we're a part of. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm thinking of somebody who is abused as a child, and you mentioned this situation, and the person who is abused then feels guilty.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's not the type of model you just described.
Right. So one of the things that's interesting about Bert Hellinger is he specifically uses certain terms to actually get us to start asking questions. And the type of guilt and innocence that he's talking about is very different from the kind of guilt that we are conditioned into having. So it's a different, sometimes I think, I shouldn't even bring that up when I give a talk because I'm not talking about those words in the normal way that we use the words. I'm talking about it more as a much more gut instinctual response. And you know what, we know, say take a friendship, something more casual than a parent-child relationship. We know as soon as giving and taking is out of balance because we can feel it. As soon as we've received too much, it's like there's this inner pressure that we can all feel, oh, I need to make a gesture and give back now. But we don't think about it because this is instinctual, and it's what actually guards our relationships so that they stay bonded. Mm-hmm.
Some people actually do think about that sort of thing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is, in regards to the family soul, or group soul, or oversoul, whatever you want to call it, what about people that are friends? What about people that are friends that were family members in past lives?
Mm-hmm.
If you really start becoming all-inclusive, then we're all really in one family soul together.
Right.
And then, one more thing,
Mm-hmm.
what about Adolf Hitler's family?
Mm-hmm.
Or Stalin?
Mm-hmm. So I don't have an answer about Hitler or Stalin. I wouldn't actually even want to go there or pretend that I could go there. But you're absolutely right. And this work, as you're about to see, as soon as you actually enter into that morphogenetic field, what occurs is a very palpable awareness of the fact that we are all in one field.
This is just an observation that in America, where we have so many races and different people from different countries, it is when people get married from different races and people different countries, that there is where is the family unit?
Mm-hmm.
Because, sometimes sometimes I feel that couples rather separate themselves from the original family units because too much friction would be, like let's say Asian. My daughter-in-law is Filipino, I'm Hungarian, and so the Filipino didn't want my son, so they kind of separate themselves and develop their own family unit. In that case, is it still as strong the other family soul effect on their developing family soul?
Great question. Yes, and in some ways stronger. So it's not at all unusual where I get a client who the actual disturbance that's causing their issue is because they've immigrated to this country and they've left behind the family that they're connected to through blood. And that can actually create a big disturbance in the family field, actually. And so there's resolutions that need to be made around that. And it's a great point because if you go far enough back, many, many people, like you said, in this country are from somewhere else. So it's something that actually comes up a lot in family constellations. So I'm going to go ahead and start the first segment. And I handed out some sheets, and on it, we didn't have time to do, thanks. We're not doing the very first part, Hunter Bowman and Bert Hellinger talk. We're going right onto the video. I'll carry on. And so just a couple things to look at with that, which you'll see, again, I mentioned, is that there is this seemingly very deep bond between perpetrators and victims. That Bert Hellinger, now having worked so many years with perpetrators and victims, his work is now, he's taken it way beyond family constellations, and he's working with issues of national concern and political concern now, taking this work in that way. So for the first one, you'll just look at this list, and it's kind of just a pointer as to some of the different things to notice. And I'll probably stop after the first one, because there may be some questions just from that, and then we'll continue with the second one. So I'm ready.
Ready?
I'm an American Indian woman from Northwest Washington State. My grandparents were of the generation where all of the Indian children were taken from their homes and put in boarding schools. Most of my family has suffered from, they haven't died of natural causes, they've died of diseases of the heart, diseases of the gut, colon cancer in particular. The women in my family haven't lived a long time on my mother's side. My mother died of complications from rheumatoid arthritis when she was 35. And my grandmother was beaten to death by her husband when she was 21.
Your mother's mother?
Yes.
So we said that's the two. Grandmother, grandfather, yes.
Your grandmother was 21 when she was killed. How old was your mother then?
The mother was 4, she said. Give in to the movement. Give in to the movement. No, the movement was different. Just fall down, but be careful. Breathe deeply with open mouth. Yes. Exhale deeply, faster. And look at her. Go on breathing. Go on breathing. That's it. Go on like that. Go on breathing. And look at her, look at her. Breathing, breathing. You are the child, her mother, and you stand beside her. Go on. Kneel down. You must breathe deeply with open mouth, deep, without any noises. That's it. And then you look at them. You look at them and go on breathing deeply. Kneel beside your mother. Can you tell them, this is my daughter?
This is my daughter. This is my daughter.
Tell them I carry on.
I'll carry on.
Tell your mother, I'll carry on. Your mother.
I'll carry on.
That makes me so happy.
And now you stand up. So two of you stand up. And now you look at them and withdraw slowly. You withdraw slowly. And then you turn. You turn, both of you, like this, yes. How that?
I'm very proud of my granddaughter.
I'm happy she can move away. I can look at him again now.
Okay. Can we leave it like that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you all for taking up such difficult roles. So, you're very good. Thank you for doing this. Yes, thank you.
We've got about 10 minutes till we take a 5 or 10 minute break, so. One of the things that that's probably obvious to you, but that usually is actually on the video before that comes on is, you know, none of these people are actors or anything. A lot of them have never done it before, and all the information that she gave, you know, that's the amount of information you get. So when I'm working with someone, I do this, you know, they state their issue. I may get a little bit of historical data about their family. I'm not getting emotional content about who was mean to who, none of that. Just, you know, the pertinent historical facts, and then you just set up the representatives, And quite amazingly, like this, the family soul or the morphogenetic field comes in and uses these representatives to bring the resolution to light. So any questions from that piece?
What represented the family soul in those? I got my name.
What represented the family soul?
Said it came in.
Right. So there's nobody or nothing that actually represents the family soul. It's just the morphogenetic field that you can see acting upon the representatives. So for example, they didn't think to themselves, okay, well now I'm going to fall to the floor howling. That's actually the soul of the man who murdered his wife coming through him.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What about issues that you don't know the historical facts of, like you were mentioning? It could be generations back that you don't have any idea of.
Right.
Find those.
Very common. So, I'm supposed to be repeating the question. So it was asked, when there's no historical data, what you do with that and how you find out about that. That's a great question. And there's two ways mainly that I work with that. One is I have enough experience and my intuition will often show me who or what it's connected to. The field will just show me. And then I test it out. I never assume at all that what I'm thinking is correct. I test it out, and I test it out by bringing in a representative and seeing what effect it has on the field. And the other way of working with that is, well, in this piece, you actually saw an amalgam of the movements of the soul. That was the first piece, where there really was no talking. Their bodies were almost brought into service of something greater, and that's often referred to as the movements of the soul. The second part was much more of a classic family constellation therapy piece, where you have the people say sentences of resolution to each other, and you check in with each representative, how are you feeling? So in an example where I don't have any historical data, I'll rely more on the movements of the soul. And I may set up even a more abstract thing. So I get a lot of people with pretty serious illness, for example. I may have the person pick a representative for themselves. So there's actually someone representing them and a representative for their illness. And then just from there, we can see where it leads. Yeah.
Does that work with most illnesses?
The question was if that works with most illnesses. And it depends what you mean by works.
Does it get results?
So far, I've always seen this work get results. Not necessarily the results the client comes for. So sometimes, as with any healing work, the client comes and they just want the symptom gone. And instead, what they find is that they actually have peace of mind with the symptom. And I see that very commonly, that someone who's lived for decades with a chronic illness will come, and they thought what they wanted was just to be healthy, but actually they leave with this much deeper freedom and peace of mind. And you know what? They don't really care anymore if they have chronic fatigue, because they have this much bigger freedom that's been made available to them. And it's also very common for symptoms to abate, but that can take longer.
Do the representatives have to be willing to engage in this prior knowledge, or can they just, somebody off the street come in and do it?
Absolutely. Somebody off the street, yep.
They don't have to have prior experience.
No prior experience. And yes, they have to be willing. So anytime someone's in a workshop with me, if you're a representative at the workshop, you can say no. If you don't, if you have any feeling at all that you don't want to do that role, that's fine. And that is, of course, what makes this work so shocking and amazing to actually, of course, be at a workshop is, whoa, how's that happening in my body? You know, so people actually return again and again and again, not to as a client or not to have personal work done, but because it's such a profoundly healing and purifying experience to be a representative. And it is an incredible experience, and as the gentleman who was sitting back there said, we're all part of one big, I wouldn't say family soul, but we're all part of one big energy field. The strongest thing you get immediately after representing is a very palpable, undeniably felt experience of we are all one. It is no longer just a concept. Yeah.
In the early 70s, I lived in New York City, and there was something called drama therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And just watching it from the audience brought me to tears.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with that, they were allowed to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Also, another one, I think there's people, I've forgotten what it's called here, that Rod Newton and his wife do, where it's where you can put in a different. Thank you, voice dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I've had that experience, but I can speak, and I get a lot of, in those experiences, I have a lot of that I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like coming out, and he said, be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting to me. Does that mean everybody's just got to stifle and?
It's a completely different field. So although, okay, my reminder for repeating the question for the video that's being made. The question was about, brought up psychodrama and voice dialogue, and that you were saying that you had a lot you wanted to share, and so is this kind of more of a stifling experience? It's actually completely, it looks similar, but it's not. The energy field that you're in is very, very different. And there's times where I will let the representatives just speak, but often I don't. And because it can actually get quite out of hand. So if you're dealing with somebody who's got psychosis, or where there's demonic energies in the family, or where there's been war, or where there's been, you know, it's a very much a balance of a feminine and masculine practice. So at the one hand, the movements of the soul, just surrendering to that, letting it come in the body, you know, is very much about a surrender. But, you know, my job is to also guide it in a way so that everyone's not just saying, you know, whatever they want to say. So, but no, people don't report feeling stifled.
To not make sound. Okay, so it would be okay then. Something about the energy field I wouldn't have to cry or scream or
Well,
try to kill somebody.
actually, I encourage those movements of the soul. But often when representatives immediately want to speak a lot, there's something more mental going on with that. It's a different process than someone just crying or someone just screaming out. Something different, you know, is going on there. And that's when I'll kind of take more of a leading role in what gets said. Yeah.
Do any of the participants achieve a deeper sense of enlightenment after the experience than previously?
So, question about did participants achieve enlightenment, deeper sense of enlightenment? Yes, consistently. So I have a lot of experience with satsang, and I have groups that come to me for that. And what I've experienced in this work, very interestingly, very intriguing to me to watch, is that by not having to point people's attention to that at all, it is pointed to that, being in this field. And I was quite surprised when I first started doing this facilitation, that every time when I do my last, you know, go around with people, that consistently people would report, I feel so still. So yes. And again, this is why representatives come back and back and back, even if they don't have a piece of work they want to do. So.
Yeah, I understand that family constellation work heals holographically. So people are healed like in the family system that aren't even present. I was wondering if you could address that or give anecdotes.
Yeah. Okay, so a question about how it heals holographically and people who are not even present at the workshop. Great question. That's exactly what it does, and which is one of the reasons why I love this work, is, is it's systems healing. So I may be working, my focus is actually never on the client, interestingly enough. I don't, in fact, in my individual private practice now, my focus is never on my client. My focus is on this larger field that they're simply a part of. And because of that, in the other energy healing work I do, interestingly enough, suddenly out of the blue after I started doing this, their family members are appearing, all sorts of, people from their field are appearing now for healing. And it does that, exactly. And I have seen the most uncanny, things like a person isn't even doing a personal piece of work. They're just in the energy field. They've represented in other people's, pieces. And I'll get an email a week later to the effect of, you are not going to believe what happened. I haven't talked to my brother in 20 years. He has mental illness. He was pushed out of the family. He just called me up. He's having symptomatic healing and on and on, things like this. All the time I get these incredible emails, which is, delicious for me because, you can really see where it's not just this one-on-one. It's really about the whole community. And it just, the ripples go out.
Yes, I was commenting to the boys in the back room there. I see a great advantage keeping the words, the verbiage to a minimum in this, because those words are primarily masculine energy, and when you go into the feeling element, the feminine energy allows the morphogenetic field to develop or become apparent.
Right, yes, who's commenting that the words, are more masculine and, the feminine, the feelings are more apparent. Yeah, I agree. And so it's that balance at something like this where people have questions and the first time they're learning, but at workshops, I pretty much don't allow people to talk. And actually, usually I hold them in silence. So on breaks and, for this same reason, at lunch where, people are usually stay silent and for that same reason. Okay, I'm on time. It's time for our break. If you can keep it to a minimum, 5 to 10 minutes the max, and then I'm going to show you another piece of work. The next piece that I'm going to show you. And it's a piece about, as you'll see, about a mother who's concerned about her schizophrenic daughter. And I just want to say a little bit about schizophrenia because I'm convinced we're all a little bit schizophrenic. So, and one of the reasons I show this piece is because I actually do similar, in my work I'll set up similar things, not necessarily specifically around someone with psychosis or schizophrenia, but to bring to light what are the inner splits that we have, because we all have inner splits. And again, this work, what I've found after studying voice dialogue, studying many, many, many things that are incredibly valuable, for me personally, what I find very different is that doing it in the field or the dimension of the family soul is that when you set up different splits, inner splits, it's so directly and palpably felt, and it holographically just shifts it in that moment. And this is just an excellent, pure example of how schizophrenia can be set up. And one of the things that's so important, again, to know, which I think you're getting a sense for, is this is about holographic systems healing. And there's really no such thing as a schizophrenic person. There are schizophrenic family souls. And one person is brought into service to bring that split to light. And that's really true. And so this is one of the reasons why you see in a family so often, well, gosh, all the rest of us are fine. What's wrong with her? And that one person or that one sibling or child is often also then the one who's excluded because they're problematic, they're a pain in the butt, they've got problems in their lives and they feel like a drain on us. And yet, when you do this work, you quickly, in your body, start to understand that that person in the family is the one carrying the load. And then when other people, even if it's just one other person in the family, but if other people in the family start to see that and include that person back in the family and back in their heart, that then the whole family has peace. And so it's no longer about, this one person is carrying the whole burden. And in fact, that's actually one of the orders of love that Bert Hellinger found. It's kind of down on the list, but it's an important one. And what it is that each member of the family soul has responsibility for how that family soul operates. Let's see. One of the things I just want you to notice again in this piece, which we saw in the last piece, but it's very clear in this piece, is how when there are disruptions in the lineage, the family lineage, we're literally talking about flow of life force. And it's a chain of life force from one person to the next. So if one link is weak or excluded or hurt or broken in some way, then that flow of life force is interrupted, which again can cause illness of many kinds. And in this, you'll see very clearly how the female lineage in this family is resolved and brought into a healed state. So just watch for that at the end of it.
I have a child who is a schizophrenic, who became schizophrenic at the age of 14. She's now 46. And I have 5 other children, and they all have been affected by this. It sort of ruined the family dynamics. When we get together, it's very stressful because of Maggie. So holidays and...
It's okay, it's okay. I propose we start with setting up yourself and your husband.
Okay.
Set them up in the way that they face the audience. All right, sit down. How are you feeling?
I feel this is too close. I feel kind of glued to him. And yeah, I can't go away, but it's too close.
I feel sort of twisted on the inside in a strange way. I feel like turning this way and at the same time.
Do. And you? How would you move?
I would move out that way.
Okay. Do. Wait. Now we set up the schizophrenic child. That's how a child gets schizophrenic. Let's start. Look at it like this. How are you feeling now?
I'm still kind of lightheaded and my hands are tingly, but I feel a little more able to breathe.
Tell her, Mom, I let you go.
Mom, I let you go.
Now I let you go.
Now I let you go.
How is that?
Scared.
Go with the movement, go back. Now you turn. Look forward. Yes, go move forward and look forward.
I'm shaky.
The only safe place is a mental hospital.
I'm lightheaded.
Aren't children beautiful? What they try to do for their parents?
Feel a little more safe in the moment.
Wait, here. What's going on with the father?
In the beginning I felt very angry and I wanted to go and sort of felt tied to his family. I have not much, no compassion for my daughter, like no real warm, no fatherly feelings for her. I have some feelings for her, like when she stood here in front of me, there was a bit of love there, but also anger that she kept me. I wanted to go and she kind of blocked me from going. But there's also some love there. It's not just the one thing, it's both.
With you?
First, when I was over there, I felt like I didn't even know I had a child. And then when I was in front of him, I felt like that he was very foreign to me. And but I felt like love, but I didn't know what to do with it. I felt like it was a demand on me and I didn't know how to deal with it, and I just felt like distancing myself from it.
And how is that towards the child?
I felt very little relationship with the child at all. Like no feelings, no grief, no.
Now you turn like this. Now you turn again. Look at your father. Tell him, I let you go.
I let you go.
Now I let you go.
Now I let you go.
I rely now on people who will care for me.
I rely now on people who will care for me.
Now you turn again. How is it now?
I'm a little better.
We'll leave it like that, you see? Now get out of your roles. Right? Yes. Thank you. Get out of your role. No?
With every birth, like when I was born, my mother died. Then when Maggie was born, my grandmother died. And then when Melissa was born, Blanche died.
Important is that your mother died at your birth?
And I almost died then too.
That's it. That's it. You go to your mother. You are drawn back to go to your mother.
I never knew.
Of course, you didn't know her.
But your soul did. There's no more intimate relationship than between a fetus and its mother.
We'll set up that too, I suppose. That's important for you, you see. I will do that, you see. I'll choose somebody for your mother. Choose somebody. Choose somebody for your mother. No, I will do that. I will do that.
Just stay still and open.
I'll tell you. Just come here. And I take you. That's it. Now look at her. Breathe deeply. And look at her. Go on breathing. Go on breathing with open mouth so that the feelings can flow. Go with the feeling, go, go. As you come here once more. Now you slip in between the two. You remain, you remain, you remain, you must be there. Now you embrace them both and you allow yourself that they both unite in your soul. Your mother and your grandmother unite in your soul. How are you feeling now?
Better. When I was here before, I didn't ever even feel like I had a mom or dad. And
Can I do something? Can I do something with her?
Of course, of course. Just sit close. It's okay. Sit close. Yes.
Don't do it alone. Just be still now. Just be still. And let the energy, the warmth, the love, the life of your mother flow through your body to your daughter. And be still. That's it.
All right. I had a strange thought. I thought, that's women's power.
Yes.
Are you feeling now?
Better. Better. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I want to say something about schizophrenia. I think it was most beautifully shown how that develops, you see, how a child has to move to and fro, two different people and two different tendencies, you see. And it couldn't succeed, you see. Poor child. But that was not the real issue. The real issue came up later, see. That's you and your mother. And schizophrenia can be dealt with in a healing way if the schizophrenic person can unite those opposites, father or mother, or grandmother and mother, as it was here, see? And it flows through you, see? So that will relieve the child. You can do with her what you just did here. Exactly the same way. And you must be aware that your mother is behind you. Okay? Good.
In this work,
So I just want to actually do a brief visualization after that one. So you just want to sit and breathe in and out of your belly and shut your eyes. And just see yourself in front of your parents, your mother and your father. And see behind them their parents, your grandparents, and behind them their parents, on and on, thousands of generations on back. And something that's common to all of you is that you received life and passed it on. And it makes no difference how they were, or who they were, or what they did or didn't do. With regard to receiving life and passing it on, they are all the same. None of them can add to it or take away. They're all in service to the same life, and where life comes from is a mystery. Now, when we look at our parents and our ancestors all the way back, we can widen our hearts and our souls and say to them, "Now I take life in its fullness from you. You are the right ones for me. You are the only possible ones for me. And now I accept it. And if I may, I will pass it on." And we see if there's anything in the way of accepting this gift of life from your parents exactly as it was passed to you, that it narrows the heart and the soul, and it weakens you. And that's where freedom stops. And so just say, "Thank you. I have the fullness of life through you. And I have everything necessary to grow on my own and to pass it on." Now beside you are other people standing in front of their ancestors. And they may be people from a different race or gender or class. Yet with regard to receiving life, we're all the same. And in front of our parents, we are all small. And you may even have an image of Buddha or of Jesus standing in front of their parents and their ancestors and receiving life just like you. And they aren't bigger or smaller than us. In front of our parents, we are all small. And only when we're willing to be small and accept life as it is, passed to us freely, can we be truly free. And now look at your life and see your life exactly as it is. And that whatever happens is part of this life. Nothing can be rejected. Nothing can be excluded without making us weak. And so you can look at your life and say, "Yes, you belong to me too. This too." And just look forward to your future and to further generations, or to whatever it is that you've chosen to put your life force energy into. And see and feel that you are just a link in the chain of receiving life and passing it on. Nothing lost, nothing gained, just the mystery revealing itself through you and being experienced by you. And then when you're ready, just bring your attention back. One of the things that people notice, sometimes just from this visualization, and very, very often when they're actually doing the work or in the field of the soul, is that when they feel their ancestors behind them in that way, it's as if they feel a force of energy pushing them forward. But they can only feel that energy pushing them forward into their life when they're actually able to be vulnerable and lean, literally, physically lean back into their ancestors. So it's when that motion happens of just, oh, okay, I'm just gonna, I'm just leaning back and I'm being supported by all of these ancestors behind me. There's just this natural flow that immediately, almost magnetically we connect to, that then pushes us into our lives. So any questions?
You said something earlier about oftentimes later in another generation somebody will take up the role of excluded member. I don't understand what you mean. Is that from reincarnation?
No. Well.
And then what happens to that person's soul evolution if they're taking the role of a previous one?
Right. Well, that's a great question. That's a great question. And I don't think of it, when I'm doing this work, I kind of stop thinking about karma or reincarnation or past lives, or I stay very focused in this realm because, believe me, it's big enough. And so I may have thoughts about those things, but I don't really bring them into this work. And what I've found is that that really serves the work, because I stay out of a place where I think I have a clue. And so I'm just very open to the soul and the movements of the soul just showing themselves to me. But in answer to your question about taking up the role of someone who's excluded, or not just excluded, it can be something else too.
Could it be even an aborted child?
Absolutely. So obviously there's some controversial things that have come out of this work, and there's people that are not so happy with Bert Hellinger. But out of, since you brought up abortion, I'll just speak to that. One of the things that's been commonly seen with that is that when abortion has been done in a way that's frivolous or really not necessary, that again, on a completely unconscious soul level, I'm not talking about emotional or psychological, and I'm not talking about what's right and wrong. A later child of that parent will somehow imitate the aborted child. So they may be ill, they may die early, they may just not thrive. There's different things. And so that's one example of where there's an identification, or what we call a soul entanglement, from one generation to the next. The other thing that it can occur in that kind of a situation is if there's an abortion and that the aborted child is excluded, so they're not thought about, the mother doesn't grieve it, that kind of thing. The mother will actually punish herself in some ways. And so I very often get women who come to me and say, no matter what I do, I just cannot get on my life path. I'm doing my life, it's fine, but I can't do my passion. I can't live life fully. And so many times it has led back to an abortion, and then that has shifted when they've brought that child into their heart.
These women are not breathed.
Right. Grieving and really, I'll guide the women not just to grieve, but to actually, name the child, really act as if they have a child that died, even though it, was not given birth to act as though they had a child that died. And often that gives them, suddenly they have strength and dignity about it. Does that answer your question, though, about how someone... So some examples of where that happens are, I just kind of Rolodex and examples come up. As there was a man who had ALS. And it became very clear in doing the Constellation that it actually related to an accident that occurred with his brother. That he and his brother were going on a hike when they were, 11 or 12. His brother fell and actually lost a limb and almost lost his life. And this brother unconsciously had extreme guilt about this his whole life, and later became ill. So we see this very often with siblings, where if one sibling is disabled in some way, or there has a great loss in their life, that out of a deep, you have to remember this always comes back to, it's not about punishment, it's about a deep love and loyalty that we have towards our family members, that the other members of the family, especially siblings, they don't feel like they can just go on and have a great, abundant, amazing life when their beloved is suffering so much. And so that is another way of kind of taking on someone else's fate and trying to carry it with them.
I don't see it that way, but okay. I see that they're guilt.
Yes, and guilt is a way of taking on someone else's fate and helping them carry it. And resolved guilt is a way of saying to that sibling, in this example, I honor your fate. I know that you're strong enough to carry yourself, and because I am having a better life, basically, because I am thriving, I will help you as your brother or sister in any way that I can. And that's a resolution. So their fates are no longer tied together, and yet the love bond is even stronger.
That's a little different than what I originally thought it was.
Have you worked at all with parents who had children who died very, very young? And what's come out of that when you have?
So the question was, if I've worked with people, with parents who've had children that have died very young, and what's come out of that? I'm Rolodexing, and I'm coming up with the card that says, do you have a more specific question?
No, I'm asking because my son had a child that died very, very young. So I was curious to know what kinds of things you've seen.
Right. Again, it really, if you can continue to tune into how deep this loyalty and love bond is between family members, only then is where you can really feel the effect. So if the death of that child was really deeply mourned, and they were remembered, and there were pictures of them, and they were kept, really held and embraced in the family still, then in that case, there's not necessarily a bad effect. And of course, the same would be with abortion or with someone, etc. So, so often these entanglements are because the grief has been too big, or because we've been conditioned to think certain things. And so we kind of just put these things out of our mind and go on with our life. And that's when entanglements really are created. But when we have this deep honor for life, then it's not necessary for these distortions to occur.
Do you do one-on-one private sessions and incorporate that with the group therapy that we've seen on the screen? Or how do you do your practice?
I do. I'm glad you asked that because I always forget to mention that. So one-on-one sessions actually work just like this, which is even more bizarre, is that I will take, there's more dialogue between me and the client, of course, and we may be working on an ongoing thing depending on how deep the issue is and how complex the family situation is. But what we do is I actually take color fields or colored pieces of paper. Some people use shoes. I mean, you can use whatever. I choose to use something that doesn't have any energetic resonance to it, to keep the field as clean as possible. And so I use colored pieces of paper, and me and or the client, we kind of tag team back and forth, will step on these places. And the exact same thing happens. So I may step on a place, and I'll report what's coming up, and then I may start to feel, just like you saw, this kind of magnetic pull, and I'll just follow that. And the work is exactly the same. Yeah, and so of course there's people who, for different reasons, don't want to come to a group, or their issue's too sensitive or whatever, and then we can work that way.